Hi everyone, if you like what I do, then be sure to hit that subscribe button and consider checking out my Patreon. Enjoy the video. As ambitious as they were industrious, the Piglins would spread far and wide across the Nether, annexing places they once feared for themselves, and building them into mighty monuments. They would dig ever deeper into the living Nether, finding a treasure that surpassed all others, and using it to elevate themselves. Their actions, though, would ultimately be as toxic as any taken by the ones who had granted them the life they now knew, costing them everything they had come to achieve. By the lizards long ago, however, saw the terrain can be extremely dangerous. Right, time to die. Birthed as fodder for a war that was not theirs, and left to rot in an alien existence. The creatures that would come to be known as Piglins would be given a chance at a meaningful existence, purely through happenstance, and the unruly experiments of those they had been sent to destroy. They would eagerly take their opportunity, and build a fledgling civilization that existed in balance with the world around them. But it may be that their thirst for progress was too great, and they would inevitably fall to the same curse that plagued every other civilization. It would start as the Piglins took control of the abandoned outposts left by those who had come before. Entire fortresses ripe for the taking. In the absence of their masters, their netherbrick had grown dark, denaturing into blackstone, and in truth these abandoned fortresses were dying, their structure becoming brittle and at risk of collapsing altogether. In their ignorance, however, the Piglins merely saw the mighty constructs as a bastion for their people, a place to continue growing their civilization, and grow it did. Their population quickly exploded, and their influence spread far and wide across the Nether. Even so, they were not yet the dominant species of this world, and on occasion, they still fell afoul of one of the Nether's great threats. Still, they had established themselves as a fearsome presence, and the Piglins' next goal would be to consolidate this power, creating weapons and defenses that would be unrivaled, even in the overworld, and become the undisputed masters of the Nether. At this time, their options were limited, for the Nether offered little in the way of exploitable resources. Some abundance of gold had been encountered in the Nether's sheer cliffs, and weaponry had been fashioned from it, but the material was weak and malleable, unfit for prolonged use, and the Piglins knew an alternative must be procured. They recalled their masters from so long ago, mining deep into the ground of the overworld. It seemed as though the most precious of substances resided in the deepest recesses, and maybe this would also be true for the Nether. It was a dangerous course of action, for this world may hold incomparable terrors within its heart, but it was one the Piglins decided was worth the risk. They began large-scale mining operations that dug through the solid netherrack, ever deeper into the unknown. As had been feared, they encountered deadly lava flows, hollows filled with terrible creatures, and an ever-growing sense that their efforts were futile, that there was nothing down there, and that the Piglins would never progress beyond their stagnation. But then came the day when they came upon something entirely different than anything they had encountered before. It was a seam of impenetrable ore, harder than even diamond. Their excitement was tentative, but in their hearts the Piglins knew that they had come upon what they had been searching for. The issue now was how they would go about extracting this fantastical netherite. All of their equipment was merely gold, and even explosives failed to break down the material. They considered the problem for some time, but in the end the answer would come from a tragedy. Uncommon as they were, vile creatures spawned during the Blaze Wars as living weapons still roamed the Nether. The most formidable of these was the Wither, a creature rarely known to approach populated areas, but one that would come to lay waste to a remote mining facility. The impetus was unknown. Maybe it saw the lone facility as an easy target. Maybe the Piglins had angered it somehow, but what was clear was that the attack had easily collapsed the netherite seam when nothing else had even come close. The answer lay within the Wither, and suddenly these once feared beings became the focus of dedicated hunts. No matter how many lives were lost, the Piglins relentlessly sought to find out how the Wither had been able to break down the netherite, and how they may be able to replicate it. Skirmish after bloody skirmish, the Piglins grew to learn that it was the Wither's explosive projectiles that were the key, and eventually, through the butchering and dissecting of these once terrible weapons of war, the Piglins found what they had been looking for. In spite of the disproportionate loss of life, the Piglins had been able to synthesize a new form of explosive from their fallen adversaries. It was a volatile material, derived from the many restless souls that resided within the Withers, meant to break down netherite at its molecular level. A substance that, in essence, wasn't too far removed from the netherite's true nature. For ever since the Great Wars had ended, and entire valleys were filled with discarded souls, the shifting sands had compacted and arranged into seams of a nigh unbreakable substance, akin to metal, but stronger than even the most tempered alloy. Armed with their newest and most prized ability, the Piglins went on to strip mine the netherite, creating weapons and armor at first to fortify their land, before expanding into technology. The wondrous properties of this element spurring a host of inventions, which catapulted their civilization into a technological revolution. Augmenting the netherite with gold only led to further advancement, from artificial lighting to integrated circuits, with each new discovery making the lives of Piglins everywhere easy and comfortable. The time of their high civilization was limited, however, for despite all attempts to patch the crumbling stone with their new technology, the bastions the Piglins inhabited continued to decay and fall apart. Only that decay wasn't limited to the Piglins' homes, for rot was setting in throughout the Nether, a slow death that threatened existence as they knew it. Finally acknowledging a problem that had pursued them for their entire history, the Piglins used their great knowledge to seek another answer, not of how to exploit the Nether, but this time of how to save it. What they quickly found though, was that the very life of this world was being sapped away, and that its ultimate death looked to be inevitable. While the end seemed unavoidable, the Piglins did find a way to prolong what time was left. To do so though, would require them to give up everything they'd achieved, and return to a state little better than when they had first awoken from their undead forms. While they had enjoyed their time of superiority and hubris, the Piglins had never been blind to their oncoming fate. Unlike the blinkered weavers before them, who had gone to any lengths to get what they desired, the Piglins had fought too hard for their very existence. They knew what it was to be less than nothing, and were ultimately content to live with the most simple of lives, if it was required of them. To this end, they resolved to dismantle their technology, vaporizing the netherite that made it up, and release the long-trapped souls so that they may rejoin the greater being that was the Nether, extending its lifespan just a little bit more. In time, netherite would become virtually unheard of, and the Piglins would be forced to search for scraps and ancient debris to ensure the Nether would live as long as it could. All the time, their bastions continued to crumble around them, and they fell back on old technologies, relying on gold for all of their tools, trading for it whatever they could. The Piglins may have become a shadow of the great people they had once been, but they had fulfilled a role none other could, becoming the guardians of life itself. But then if they were the guardians, then could it be that there was a usurper, a life stealer, and the real reason why the Nether was dying? A being of untold power who would destabilize the very foundations of reality, simply to maintain itself.
Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you saw, then please consider liking the video, subscribing and sharing it with your friends. If you want to support the channel even more, then head over to Patreon, become a channel member, or buy some merch. Links are all down in the description. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next time.